I was on a Mexican orphanage, and after being there for some time, I finally asked the executive director, how did all these kids' parents die? And he said, they're not dead. Mm-hmm. He said, these kids have been abused, neglected, abandoned. Parents are in prison. There's prostitution. There's almost in every case, bad addiction involved. And my wife said, oh my gosh, these are the same kids here in the States, but we just call them something different. And that was a real light bulb moment. She realized I can fulfill God's purpose on my life where I live in every county and every, in the United States. There are kids who need that help.
Welcome to a new episode of the Hope Strategy Podcast. I'm Corey Blake, and this is episode 1 of the special mini-series that we're doing with the Orphan Myth campaign. And today we talked to the incredible gentleman, Brian Mavis, who is the president at America's Kids Belong. He's the co-founder of Adopt Colorado Kids, and his role at both of these organizations is uniting government, business, nonprofits, faith-based, and creative communities to end the foster care and adoption crisis in the U.S. state by state. Brian was such a pleasure to talk with and hear his background of how he got involved with America's and founded and became president of America's Kids Belong, but then also how that tied into the Orphan Myth campaign and how he got involved there. He's incredibly educated and well-versed on all things that are related to the foster care system in the United States. We talked a lot about the problems with the system, some of the biggest concerns, some of the biggest reasons that he got involved. But then we talked a lot about the solutions and how he's been an innovator in creating means to humanize these foster children, first in Colorado, and now as they've expanded throughout the United States. One of the main things they've done is created a website where you can go on and they've interviewed face-to-face on video these incredible kids, these foster kids, so that families and people that are interested in getting involved in foster care or adoption can go on and actually see a face and not just see a number, and see the need and again humanize this problem. We talked a lot about that. So such an inspiring guy, both as a pastor, as an entrepreneur, and as an individual that's doing good, and really him and his wife dedicating, their life to this cause. It's so inspiring and so hopeful. And this was a great conversation to kind of jumpstart the Orphan Myth mini-series that we'll be running all week this week. So please listen and enjoy this conversation of the Hope Strategy Podcast with Brian Mavis. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you've heard me and Josh talk about MWI, which is our digital marketing agency. If you're new around here, this may be a first introduction to MWI. We're a full-service digital marketing agency that specializes in everything from website design and development to search engine optimization and all forms of paid advertising, whether it's paid social advertising or paid search advertising, content marketing, digital PR, social media management. Basically anything a business needs to strengthen and grow their digital footprint is what we do over at MWI. The website is mwi.com. And for any listeners of the Hope Strategy Podcast, I'd love to offer a free 20-minute consultation with yours truly to talk about your business, to talk about your goals, to understand, what you need to be doing from a digital marketing strategy and action plan standpoint in order to yield some results and grow your business online. So please reach out at mwi.com/hope strategy. That's mwi.com/hope strategy to sign up, and we will be in touch. Now back to the show.
Something is happening in our world.
Time is very precious. I'm going to show you how great I am. Hope in the face of difficulty.
More than machinery, we need humanity.
Hope in the face of uncertainty. I'm better now than I was. I'm experienced now.
Changing the world can happen anywhere, and anyone can do it.
The audacity of hope.
This is the Hope Strategy Podcast with Corey Blake and Josh Steinley. It is a real pleasure to meet you. One of the things I've loved most about doing a podcast is that I'm just meeting so many amazing people that I never would have otherwise, through, and specifically with some of the conversations we've had on the subject of the foster care system. So many of our guests have gone through that, and we've talked about kind of the process and some of the trials and tribulations that they've been through. And then, as you know, we spoke with Lindsay Hadley a few weeks ago, and I believe her episode will have already come out. And we talked about the Orphan Myth Project and this campaign that they're doing. And it just, again, struck a nerve with me, as our listeners have heard. My co-host Josh, who's not with us today, but he's adopted multiple children, and it's something that's near and dear to us. And so I'm really excited to learn all about you and your background and hear where you're coming from, and then figure out where the road merges with Orphan Myth and this project and this campaign that's going on. And then here, hopefully the audience can hear and see how they might be able to help. So thanks so much for coming on and talking to us, man.
Thanks for having me.
I know that you haven't heard the podcast yet, and I'm certain that after this, you're going to go listen to all 31 episodes.
I'm excited.
Binge all of them. I'm just kidding.
I have a 7-hour drive coming up.
Oh, there you go. Hey, there you go. Jump on in. I'm just kidding. But where I like to start is to understand where people are coming from, where they make their meaning, what their upbringing was like, what some of the, those molding moments for them that built them into the person that they are. So that then, as we talk about all of the incredible things that you're doing now, we can kind of wrap our mind around, okay, this is where Brian's coming from. This is what So tell me a little bit about your upbringing, how you found Christianity, how you've dedicated so much of your life to this cause. We've talked to so many people that are Christian, Jewish, agnostic, atheist, and I love understanding where people are coming from. And I'd love to hear the path of how you found, how you became the man that you are today.
Yeah. Well, I didn't grow up in a Christian home, at least one that wasn't practicing. I think we would have called ourselves that, but we didn't do anything. And then my dad owned a construction company and hired a guy who was a youth minister. And I worked every summer for my dad since I was 10. And then I think that was like 14 when I met him. And he wasn't like all the other guys on a construction crew, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
So I thought, what if this guy's weird?
That guy's interesting.
But I really liked him. And he started inviting me to church, and I said no. Or actually I said yes, but I was lying.
You said yes and didn't show up.
I have no interest. And then he invited me to a St. Louis Cardinals baseball game. We lived out in Illinois. And so I said yes to that. And then I feel like I owed him one. So I went, and then I was like, hey, I kind of liked this. And so
switch.
It took years though, for me to grasp grace. I really felt like I had to earn grace, which is, again, ridiculous. It's a gift. And so it wasn't until I was 17, just about to graduate from high school, when I really committed my life to God. And I remember essentially I said, God, I'm giving you my whole life, but please, please, please don't make me a minister. And then I think he felt like that was a challenge. And a few years later, I was on my knees just saying, God, that's also, I feel like God changed my wants. But really then when it comes to this issue though, of like how I was doing church work I've done that for 25 years. And, but when it comes to the like kids who are needing families, that story really starts in my wife's heart. When she was a teenager, she grew up in Southern California, and she grew up in the church, and her youth group was going to Mexico for a missions trip, and they ended up going to an orphanage.
Okay.
And while my wife was just kind of watching these kids, play and hang out with her and stuff, she said she heard the voice of God, not an audible voice, but she said might as well have been like a branding iron on the brain. And it was a 3-word sentence he gave to her. It was care for orphans. And at that moment, as a teenager, she knew her purpose in life.
And so at this point, you're in Illinois somewhere, living your life, doing your thing, finding Christianity, and she's over in Mexico having this experience. And who would have thought, all these years later,
right?
Here we are.
Yeah. So she, as a young single woman, then does a few more things living in Mexico on orphanages. Then we meet and I ruin her life.
Is that the first thing she tells people when she meets him? This is my husband. He ruined my life.
I said, so we meet Mary, and we actually did go to Honduras together for a while. And she worked on an orphanage there that was also a hospice. All those kids were orphaned in the way that they were abandoned because they all had cancer. And so she worked there in a place called Amor y Vida, means love and life. And then we moved back to the States, started having our own kids. And then by the time our kids were in elementary school, everything looked great, great, typical American dream kind of life, except my wife was feeling lost. She felt like she had lost her purpose in life. How is she supposed to care for orphans when she's living in the United States? We have her own kids, all that kind of thing. And so, like a key moment was, at nighttime, we pray with our girls. When they were little, we'd say three things, tell God, thank you for something, sorry for something, and please for something. And on the pleases, they started off asking God for a puppy. And then my youngest one night asked me, what did God say? And I said, he said to ask your mom. And she said, I think God would want us to pray that we would that he would be with the orphans, care for the orphans. So we started praying that, and then we started sponsoring a couple kids in Africa. And then my wife finally said, are there orphans in the United States? And I was like, never heard of that. And so we started investigating it, and within days discovered this world of foster care. And long story short,
we'll get into that. But the reason that's such an impactful question is because it's the word orphan in the U.S. has kind of been taken out of the vernacular. It's not something that we think, well, we don't have orphans. And I don't, was that a intentional decision made, like politically or something? Like at some point, did they say, we're not going to have orphans anymore, let's have the system just called foster kids, and that'll change the perception?
Yeah, I think, in the United States, the history there is there wasn't a place for that was to protect kids who were being harmed. And the very first child who kind of enters a system enters under the Humane Society. There was something for animals, but nothing for children. And so eventually there becomes a kind of this farmed out system of, kids, orphan trains, kids heading to the country. And then there's this family-based system. And so compared to most other countries in the world that are the institutionalized kids, we in the United States try to use a family-based system. And so kids are being raised in institutions, they're being raised in families. But there's more to that story because there aren't enough families.
Yeah.
So so my wife makes this connection, though. So we start taking training for becoming foster parents. And one of the first things they address, again, is this myth of why kids are in foster care, because a lot of people think, oh, these are delinquents, these are bad kids. They kind of put themselves there. And it's like, that's not what happened. What happened was it was discovered that this child wasn't being taken care of either. The child was experiencing trauma through extreme neglect, abuse, or abandonment. So, they're sharing these stories with us of like abuse, abandonment, neglect. Parents might be extreme addicts. They might be in prison. There might be prostitution involved. And my wife has this flashback. She goes, I was on a Mexican orphanage. And after being there for some time, I finally asked the executive director, how did all these kids' parents die? And he said, they're not dead. Mm-hmm. He said, these kids have been abused, neglected, abandoned. Parents are in prison. There's prostitution. There's almost in every case, bad addiction involved. And my wife said, oh my gosh, these are the same kids here in the States, but we just call them something different. And that was a real light bulb moment. And she realized I can fulfill God's purpose on my life where I live in every county and every, in the United States. There are kids who need that help.
Yeah. Well, isn't that kind of interesting? Because you hear about these mission trips, or these groups that go to Mexico. I lived in Guatemala for 2 years. I served a mission for my faith down there. And so I know the situation down there well, very intimately. You always hear about these trips to Mexico, Central America, South America, Bolivia, whatever, to go, help, which is great. All good. 100% support it. That's awesome. But it is interesting to think that right here in the US, I think the number is there's 400 something thousand foster children. Yeah. And a lot of those are displaced. A lot of those kids are caught in the middle or caught in between or bouncing from family to family to family. And it seems like there's probably a lot more, which, we can touch on, but a lot more that you could do a lot closer to home and not have to get on a plane and go somewhere else in order to kind of help this problem as a whole.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
It's kind of interesting timing because kind of a side note here. This idea of orphans in the U.S. has been on my mind recently because as our listeners know from some previous conversations, but my parents were divorced when I was a kid, and I never knew my mom's family. They're from Oklahoma, Texas, and I grew up kind of out west a little further. But just a couple of weeks ago, I went for the very first time. One of my uncles on that side passed away, and I just felt like I should go to the funeral. I've never met any of these people before. I saw it on Facebook and I was like, you know what, this might be an opportunity to pay my respects to this side of the family that I don't know, to this uncle that I never met, my mom's oldest, one of her older brothers. So I went out there and it was amazing. We don't need to go into the details of all that, but I was doing some family history work while I was there. And I found out that I think it's my great grandpa or my great great grandpa was in an orphanage. He was Native American. He was Chickasaw, full-blooded Chickasaw, and his parents had either, who knows what happened, that nobody knows. We can't find any record of where his parents ended up, but he ended up in an orphanage in the middle of nowhere in Oklahoma. And we went and saw that it's now a home for girls, I think is what it's called now, but he escaped from that and went on to do some pretty incredible things. But it's been on my mind a lot because that was one of those first conversations. Like, I actually asked my wife, like, do we still have orphans? Are there orphanages? Where do the orphans go in the States? And then I started doing some research on it. And now then we talked to Lindsay like the next week, and now we're talking. It's kind of all coming together. Really interesting. I'm fascinated by all this stuff. So anyways, sorry, a little bit of a side note, but
yeah, a lot of us, I think a lot of people, if they did a little research, it wouldn't take long for them to discover it's in their family somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. So you did. So, okay. So that's an amazing story, by the way. And I think about that with my wife sometimes too. Like when you were there doing this thing, I was in this other part of the world doing this thing. We had no idea. So it's interesting to see your paths cross. Mm-hmm. You're finding, this thing that you've dedicated your life to, Christianity. Your wife's already a Christian. She's finding this love and need and to be fulfilled in order to help orphans. And you get married and you start your family and you realize that there's a bigger problem. How did you end up starting? So you're the founder and president of America's Kids Belong, mm-hmm. which is your own organization separate from, that's the organization I believe that's involved with Orphan Myth Campaign and Project. So mm-hmm. Tell me, how did that end up getting started then? And tell me about what the work is that you do with America's Kids Belong.
Yeah, we started it on accident. So there was no grand plan, but a couple things happened that all of a sudden made our eyes open, and we couldn't unsee what we saw. And so we just leaned into the issue. And so part of that is my story. In 2007, I was a pastor in a church in Colorado, and I had a child welfare worker call me, and she said, "Can we talk about the state of kids and child welfare in our county?" And I said, sure. And so she came over a few days later, this lady named Cindy, and we met in the lobby of the church. And she said, "Thanks for meeting with me. I've been trying to meet with a church leader for 3 years. You're the first one to say yes." Oh, geez. And so I apologize that had been her experience. But again, so it doesn't sound like I'm patting myself on the back. I think I would have told her no a couple of years earlier if it hadn't been for my wife. I would have just been like, what's what do we have to do with this? So,
which is probably what everybody else thought, right? We've got a lot of fish to fry, and that's
right. There's a lot of good things. Yeah, this is not on the first page.
They're not sitting around twiddling their thumbs doing nothing. They're just preoccupied and stuff. Yeah.
So went back to my office, and she shared. She said, "Brian, really, I just came here to tell you one thing." She said, "In the 27-year history of child welfare in our county, there's never been one day, not a single day, where kids have not been waiting for a family to take care of them." And she said, "I have a challenge for you." She said, "Help me change who waits." There's another, that was my 3-word phrase that changed my life. Change who waits. She said, "Help me recruit so many families who step up for these kids that they're on the waiting list, not the kids." And so I accepted this challenge of changing who waits. And a year later, we fulfilled that goal. So what hadn't happened in 27 years, we were able to help fulfill within a year. And it wasn't just our church, it was other churches. And really they had 2 convictions. One was, it wasn't that the church didn't care, it was just that they were unaware. And the second one was that the kids needed an opportunity to be seen and heard, give them a face and a voice. And so that's what we did. We interviewed kids, photographed them, and eventually, and not in that year, but eventually we started getting the permission to video kids. And that was a real innovation. And I always say the innovation wasn't media technology. Anybody can film a kid. The innovation was trust, getting child welfare to trust you enough to do that for a kid that's under the state's custody. So we did that. And when we started, there were 800 kids in Colorado who were legally free to be adopted, and parental rights had been permanently terminated. And over the next 5 years, through our videoing and stuff, and other things were happening in the state. I don't want to take sole credit, but we got the number down to in the 280s, and a lot of the kids were older. So that's the other part.
What did you say the number was? What was the first number?
800.
Wow.
And again, that number isn't static. There are new kids coming in every week. So, but we were outpacing it. And that, again, the other thing, again, is at the same time that I was challenged, my wife and I were fostering a baby, had been born addicted, and we had special training on medically fragile children and really working hard for reunification to his parents who were addicts. And 9 months in, they did something really bad to each other and unsafe extremely. And so child welfare told us, hey, goals changed. This baby needs to find a new forever family. Asked if we would be interested. And we were, and we loved him. But our goal was reunification always. And so my wife asked just another key question. She said, what would happen to him if we said no? And again, so this is in 2007 and times have changed. But at that moment, she said, oh, he'll be fine. There's a line of people for the babies. I wish there was just a line for all the other kids. And my wife was like, what other kids? And that's where she said, there's 800 kids in Colorado that nobody wants because they're not, little, and they, have siblings or, all these other things and so we just thought, this is unjust. And, you shouldn't be disqualified because you're older than 5. So that was our challenge. And then 6 years ago, we were challenged to go beyond Colorado. So at first it was just Brian and Julie. Then we started a nonprofit called Adopt Colorado Kids. And then 6 years ago, we went national, changed the name to America's Kids Belong. Teamed up with a couple in Virginia. She was the Secretary of State, or had been the Secretary of State of Virginia. They did a political campaign, governmental campaign called Virginia Adopts. We had a great grassroots model in Colorado. What they did, we called a grass tops model, and we married the models and really now work to activate entire communities, entire states to engage in this issue.
So is the method still the same? Or are you still using the medium of like video and kind of interviewing? Because I think so often that's the problem with a lot of things, is that it's easy to put something in the other category. And, we're all human beings that are busy and have our own things we're worrying about. And so when you don't see something or hear something or really humanize something, especially human beings, orphans, or, foster kids, it's really easy to just not think about it. Right. And so, I mean, it's such a simple but incredible idea to say, well, no, let's humanize them. Let's have them get on the camera and talk about who they are and what they're like. So is that still the model? Do you go into new states and find these foster kids and interview them? And then, I mean, where do they go after the video? Do you put them on a website or something, or how does that work?
Yeah. So we do still do that. And so it's called, that particular program is called the I Belong Project. And again, in a way I want people to think about it, it's just one tool in our toolbox. It's just one slice of the pie. And though it's often the thing that we start with, and the reason we start there is it is something that kind of unifies the community. It's easy to understand. It is visual, and it is it can be emotional. What we try to do, though, we always try to dignify the kids, and you said exactly right. I mean, I believe that these kids get reduced to stats and numbers and figures, and it's like numbers are numbing. So let's change the numbers into narratives, and the figures into faces, and the stats into stories. And so we do that now. Again, that's just one thing that we do. Our real core of what we do is this: we are the connective tissue. We come in and we work, ideally when we do everything, we work with the governor's office, and we work with the heads of child welfare, and we come up with understanding what they need. And it's typically they need more adoptive families, more foster families, more support for those families. So if you're not in a place to foster adopt, but you can foster a family who fosters. And then also activation of the community as a whole to strengthen families, including those families who are at risk of losing their children, because we want to prevent the preventable. If we can keep a child in their family that is at risk, and they're at risk because of those things I mentioned before, but they're still not in danger, then let's support that family and keep them from falling into the river in the first place before we have to fish their kids out later. So we do these campaigns, multi-sector, multi-year campaigns. I different metaphors I use are like we get all the geese to fly in formation, and we start off recognizing that most of the geese that could help move things along are just walking around. They're not flying at all. And then other ones that are flying are going in different directions. So let's get them all going in the same direction. And another way I put it, using a different animal, is I was challenged. I had a child welfare worker in Texas ask me, she said, have you ever heard the African proverb that says, when the elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers? She said, we have got to quit fighting with the church because it's the kids who are suffering for it. And I loved that proverb. And I thought, oh, that's what we are. We're elephant trainers. We help these big sectors of the business sector, the government sector, the faith sector, the creative sector, all work together.
Yeah, I heard you say that in another interview, that proverb, and it struck me because it's something that it can go really well for this, but it works for a lot of different situations. Yes. Mm-hmm. It works for a lot where there's two people that are so focused on, the conflict between the two of them, that there's all sorts of casualties around them. And I love that saying, when two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers, right? That's just getting destroyed beneath their heavy feet. Yeah. That makes sense for a lot of different things. So, what's the biggest, well, I'm sure there's a lot of them, but what are some of the biggest trials that you face in this process? So we're continuing to talk about this issue and this problem as you go into how many states are you in currently that you're working in?
We do the video stuff that I talked about. We're in 12 states, and then we're in right now, about half of those states we also do more. And so this year we're going to do 3 campaigns with 3 different governors. And then some of the states where we're not doing a governor campaign, we're still activating the business community and the faith community as well.
So you've got the faith community, the religious community, then you've got the government, you've got the political side of things, and then you have the business. And so the idea is bringing all of those things together with one purpose, like you said, align the geese so that they're flying together, and so the good things happen. That's awesome. I mean, it's incredible that you're doing it. It seems like a great solution to a problem that's been around for a long time. So I want to talk a little bit. Again, I'm a solutions guy, and I always say that the biggest pet peeve, one of my biggest pet peeves, is if somebody comes to me with a problem and in the same breath don't utter at least an idea of a solution.
Yeah.
With that in mind, though, I want to talk a little bit about the problem, and just so that we fully understand some of the, and again, like you said before, we don't want these people, these kids are so much more than a statistic or a number, but those numbers will help us paint a picture.
Yeah. For sure.
So what is the status currently in the U.S.? What are some of those numbers on this issue, on the problem with orphans in the United States?
Yeah. So there are right now over 420,000 kids today in the foster care system, and they now take that 420,000 and they need to be divided in essentially 2 groups. There's over 100,000 of those kids who are in the legally free category, meaning they're on this path to needing a new forever family, permanent family. Their parental rights have been terminated. And the other 300,000+ are on a path towards reunification. So they need a temporary family who will care for them until their first, family can care for them. So
when you apply or go through the process to become a foster parent, you select or opt in to either say, I want to be a forever family, or I want to adopt a child that stays with us forever, or I'm just willing to be kind of a middle step. Is that how it works? Or to somebody who
it's different. It's different in different states. Some states allow you to say, I only want one or the other. And some states say you have to be a foster parent, and you have to then have the flexibility to do that. So again, just the general rule is the first goal for every kid is reunification, and you work towards that. You don't try to sabotage it. You root for those parents. And if it doesn't happen, if something's discovered that is irreconcilable, or that parents cannot recover from what caused the separation in the first place, then the goal changes to, and then that foster family is usually the first ones to be asked, would you adopt this child?
So can you help me understand and this is maybe a little bit difficult, but kind of not a day in the life, but the process for these kids, like just to, again, humanize and paint a picture for anybody listening that has no idea so starting with like, okay, well, they're in this home and something happened. The parents are drug addicts, like you said, or what is the kind of life cycle of, what does this process look like for most of these kids, and what is their reality?
Yeah. So someone calls and says something's not right. It's usually a teacher or neighbor, and then someone investigates it. They're usually given a few chances, but there's like, hey, let's try to fix this. We don't want to remove your child, but
is that usually like the Child Protective Services?
Yeah.
And is that a federal program, or is that per state?
Per state. Yeah.
Okay.
And they would say, look, we really want to keep your child with you. And there's more, it's more and more work on that too. Like, let's put more and more resources towards trying to help those families. But addiction, and again, we're talking like bad stuff, and that can lead to other, I'll say, and I've had this confirmed by child welfare workers, it's never one thing. Yeah. It's addiction plus this, plus that, neglect, abuse, whatever. It's a lot of things usually. And so you go and try to fix it. If it can't be fixed, and it really feels like the child is now in danger. The child's removed. So here's something, again, you start talking about, like, let's paint a picture of what's typical. What's happening right now is most kids come with siblings. So it's not one kid that gets removed. Yeah. It's 2, 3, 4. And immediately, so they get in the car, then they're taken to the government office, and that child welfare worker starts making phone calls like, can you take 4 kids? Can you take? And what happens is, very typically, siblings get separated. The little ones get picked first. They end up can't find a family that's in their school district, so they end up not only being separated from a dangerous situation again, but again, so it's good that they're taken out of danger, but even that removal is now a new trauma for the kid. Then they're being separated from their siblings, separated from their teachers, schools, friends, everything that's familiar. And so their experience, even in the rescue, is now become a hard experience for them. And they feel unseen, and they're suffering there as well. And so we're really working on one way to put it is help the child keep the most and lose the least. And the way that can happen is you recruit more and better families right where the kid lives. And so what could happen instead is child welfare worker goes, I've got a great list of potential families here, makes a few phone calls, and someone says, I can take all 4, or and we live in their school district, and I've got plenty of support to make this possible. So that's the then that gives it more chance for the reunification to be possible. It just improves, because if right now these kids, because of the current situation, their outcomes become worse, like less chance for reunification, less chance for any kind of permanency, separation from friends, family. And then a lot of kids end up never having permanency. They age out of the system, and the outcomes that come from aging out of the system are horrific. They are foster care in those situations leads to all sorts of social wounds. They're the leading group to most likely being trafficked. Leading like 3 times more likely to commit suicide. There's addiction issues and problems with the law and poverty and all sorts of things. So if you can go upstream and help these kids have a safe family, either temporarily until they can be reunited or permanently, if that's what's needed, it can change all sorts of outcomes. So one way I put it is like, thank God for these groups that help addiction and homelessness and trafficking and crisis pregnancies. But wouldn't it be great if we could help these kids not need any of those things 10 years from now because they have a family? So it's not just a heart issue. It's a smart issue. It's strategic.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like that's exactly what you guys are working on, is taking these emotional, spiritual experiences that you've had and then saying, let's build processes around this. Let's build systems, and let's put smarts behind this in order to solve a problem, which is so incredible. Man, to put, as you were saying that, it's just, having grown up with siblings and stuff. And I just can't imagine being in a situation that's so unhealthy in the first place. Mm-hmm. Or maybe the only thing that you have to cling to in that situation is the few moments that you do have with your parents where it's positive. And then if not that, then your siblings that you can, lean on, and then to be taken out of that situation, which again, I understand why that's so critical and important to keep for safety reasons and stuff. But then I just can't imagine then it's like, well, now you're in this random office, and now you're leaving separate from the only things I just, that tears my heart out. I mean, that's so sad.
Yeah. And again, we ask people like you're empathizing with it. So we ask them to do that because typically as adults, we think it seems scary for us to step up to be foster parents and let this kid in our house. It's like, really? You're scared? Imagine how the kid feels.
Yeah. Tell me about Orphan Myth. Let's get into the Orphan Myth campaign. So the idea around it is, I've mentioned this to a few people, that obviously the immediate question, and the reason that has this name, is because there are 3 myths. And since you've been doing so much talking, I'll go through, I'll give you a break for just a second. I'm going to go through what the myths are.
Okay.
And this is based on incredible minds coming together that have been like yourself, who have worked on and in this problem for so long. And I'm sure this was a process to say, how can we distill this down into 3 myths, right? Because there's probably a lot more, but we'll go through what those 3 myths are and what the actual truth is behind those myths. And then talk about this campaign that's coming out in March and this entire process and goal to help in some way to, positively impact this whole problem. So the 3 myths are, and we've touched on these already through what you've said, but that kids in orphanages have no parents or families. That's something that is common perception, right? Well, they're an orphan or they're a foster kid. They must not have, something happened to their parents. They're not around, right? And I saw something attached to this orphan myth when I was doing some research, that there's a lot of fictional characters that have kind of helped build this narrative. Harry Potter, Batman. I'm trying to think of some of the other images that I saw that kind of paint this picture of like, their parents died tragically and now they're but that's not the case. Children are often living in institutions as a result of poverty, and as many as 80% have a living parent or relatives in the community who could care for them with the right support. So that's the truth to that first myth. Second myth, there are no orphans in the US. We talked about that. It's kind of been taken out of the vernacular, as I said. It's not something we talk about a ton. But the US has over 400,000 children and youth in foster care living with foster families or in group homes. 100,000 of those children are available for adoption. So there are orphans in the US. And then the third is that the problem is not solvable, that it's too big, that there's nothing we can do about it. And the truth to that is that it is solvable. Solutions have already been developed, and there are more than enough local families for children. So that's where this whole campaign comes into play, right? Is figuring out how to get more families activated, engaged in this entire process, so that nationwide, globally, we can have the result that you had in Colorado, which is we switch the waiting list. We change who waits. Right now, there's so many families that are willing and ready to bring foster kids into their home and to provide safety and security for them, that we changed the narrative and flipped the script on that. I want to ask one question before we go a little bit more into this. And why, in your opinion and in your experience, why is family so important?
Oh gosh. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. Wow. I think from my perspective, it's ordained. God created the family, and it's something as children. I mean, if you start understanding a little bit more about the development of the brain as a child, right off the bat, the child is making bids for attachment. And there's some disturbing videos you can watch this. If you just have a child who's like trying to make a bid for attachment and you just give a flat effect on them, they start looking really confused and then scared. I mean, infants.
If you give, what did you say? What kind of effect?
A flat effect, just like you're just like a stone cold.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They would, they're trying to process this. Well, it does brain damage. It changes the physiology of the brain. And so, as humans, we're born to be relational, and we're born to, again, it's just, if you just look at us as, primates, if you want to take that effect, it's like we take super long to develop as humans. All other species are pretty much independent within months, and we take years and years and years. We need parents. We need parents to guide us, protect us, help us grow, facilitate our brains, to help us attach, to connect with other humans. And I would say, I think recently with the nuclear family, I believe in that, mom, dad, siblings, all that. But I think what we've missed in America is the importance of grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors. Gosh, I remember when I was growing up, I couldn't get away with anything with my neighbors. It's just, we need more of that in our lives again.
and a lot of the countries I've traveled to or spent a lot of time in, that's still very much a part of the culture.
Yeah.
It's not another country, but it is another culture. Having lived in Hawaii for so long, that's still one of the things I miss most about it. So shout out to all my Hawaii friends, but is that everybody in the community is auntie and uncle.
Yes, I love that. Yeah.
So like I still say it. I mean, I still say it. Like just picked my son up yesterday from a friend's house. They went on a little play date after school. And I wanted to say, hey, say thank you to auntie, because that's what I'm used to saying now. It's just part of, but as I started to say it, I'm like, oh, that's not what we say here. So I said, say thank you to Becca. It's like, that's not, I miss so much having that. Everybody you see in the community is, hey, auntie, hey, uncle. And I loved being uncle in the community. I loved when the kids were in our neighborhood and they'd say, hey, uncle, what's up? It just immediately ties you. And I couldn't agree more. I don't talk to my neighbors as much here, and it's much more closed off, and the walls of our home are kind of our own. There's a good side of that, which is the in my opinion, the four walls of your home are sacred, and that place is safe, and it's supposed to be the most safe and special place for your kids. But at the same time, it would be nice if there was a little more
right. And I believe that, yeah, but it shouldn't be. It's essential, but it's not sufficient. I mean, you need more. You do need aunts and uncles, and so that's the way God made us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I put you on the spot with that question, but the reason I ask it is because I agree, one, but two, so much of everything we're talking about, the end goal is to get to a family. And it's easy, just like you kind of objectify a lot of things in these conversations, like the family. It's like, yeah, you just got to get to a family. Well, why though? Why? And the reason why is because it's stability, it's security, it's comfort, it's attachment, it's education, it's love, it's all of these attributes that are so critical for development, right?
You put it one way: a good family is way, way, way better than a great program or great institution.
Yeah.
Would you be okay do you have nieces or nephews?
Yeah, a lot of them.
Would you be okay if they were something happened to their parents and they were institutionalized and raised in an institution?
No.
If it's not good enough for them, why is it good enough for somebody else's kids? I mean, it's just like,
I agree.
Everyone gets it immediately when they're like, oh no, that would not be cool.
Yeah. Okay. So again, in all of these, I know, because I'm one of the people listening, where you hear this and you're like, well, no, duh, it's common sense. Of course, I'm going to be a foster parent, right? But there are barriers to that, and so we want to try to break those down, and that's what the goal of the Orphan Myth campaign, this whole initiative, is. So walk me through the goal of the Orphan Myth campaign that's going to be launching here in the coming week.
Okay, so it's really this initiative to create a new movement and helping people become, one, aware of the issue and aware of these myths, that we've covered here. And, first awareness, second education of like, okay, help me, I want to learn more. And we want to soften their hearts to the issue, open their eyes to the issue, inform their minds to the issue. I would say along the way, we would want to not just soften their hearts, but strengthen their hearts. And that's where we want them to learn more about the effects of trauma on childhood when it's happening in childhood, and how to collect a new skill set of parenting to help a child heal. We want communities. Here's another thing. So many people are going to say, I care about this, but I'm not in a place where I can foster or adopt, can't open my heart or home to a child right now. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean you can't do anything. Everyone can do something. Only a few % of us are called to foster or adopt. 100% of us are called to care. And it might, again, so there's a way you can surround these families with support. You can have your business activated in it. You can have your church activated in it. So there's something for everyone. And if we make this groundswell, which is what Orphan Myth hopes to do, is along with us. Orphan Myth also has this global initiative, and that is to deinstitutionalize in these orphanages, and to take the orphanages that exist that are have mostly kids who are in there because of poverty reasons, and to transform those orphanages into places that work towards reunification. And so I would say I want to make sure that these places aren't being shamed. I think we all did like the best we knew to do, but now we know better. So let's do better. Let's stop working towards building orphanages where they're not needed, and let's work towards emptying them or repurposing them to be a place of reunification.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing here, because it's easy to have these conversations and write off all of the work that's been done to date as bad, right? Because there's still a problem. The fact is people work, with what they've got. And I think the big push and what I'm seeing here is there's this extra level of hope at this point where so much more awareness is happening. There's people like you that are trying to build bridges where there haven't been bridges in the past. Again, going back to that elephant, proverb where there needs to be collaboration between these groups of influence, businesses and religious organizations that have always been a part of this, but then the government organizations that are trying to fix it as well. And again, the Orphan Myth campaign is driven to drive awareness. And then you can also, so the website is orphanmyth.org. And as far as I understand it, you can help me kind of paint as much a picture here as we can. But the idea is you've got charities and you've got religious groups, but and other organizations that we talked about. But the idea here is to form teams that you can create within your own circle of influence, within your business, within whatever. To form these teams, you go on the website and you figure everything out, orphanmyth.org. But you can form these groups, and then you yourselves can become kind of sub-organizations in order to build awareness and raise money, right?
Yes.
And the idea is, instead of just relying on all these groups, let's build these more localized social media and community-driven groups that can build and raise awareness, but then also raise money that's going to go back into the organization to go, 100% to
right. So that's called the 100%. That's their first initiative. This is the 100% participation campaign. And so, like you said, it's say for example, you work for a company, you have 12 employees. The goal, what you'd say is let's become a team, and the goal is to have all 12 of us contribute financially to this. And it doesn't matter the amount. Somebody might give $100 and somebody gives $1. What matters is that all 12 participate. So that's the first initiative. It begins in, I think, mid-March and goes a little bit into April.
Yeah. And that's so the 100% participation, that again, it goes back to the thought that we've said multiple times, is that everybody wants to in their mind. I mean, not everybody, but most people say, I wish there was something I could do. It's not the right time. It's not whatever. But just the fact that you're participating, even if it's 50 cents, $1, whatever it might be, the fact that you're participating is a step in the right direction. And if that's what you can do at this point, if everybody were to give $1, that'd be a whole lot. It'd be $200 or $300 million, right? If everybody in the US did it. And obviously this is a global initiative as well, but so again, it's orphanmyth.org. We're going to be talking about it all week with other incredible people just like Brian that are involved and that are engaged in this problem. Where right now, Brian, would be the best place for people to, because obviously this campaign we want to push and help, and this is one very small piece to a large pie here. This is a big push that's going to have huge impact. And whether you hear it here on the podcast or see it somewhere else, there's a lot of organizations and groups and individuals and influencers and things that are behind this Orphan Myth campaign. So I'm excited to see it roll out in mid-March into April. Now that's happening right now, but with your organization and your nonprofit, where's the best place that people can find you and learn more about what you're working on? And if you were to maybe give one tip right now to anybody listening to have an impact on this problem, what would it be?
Yeah. So thanks. The easiest is just go to our website, which is AM, the first two letters of America, amkidsbelong.org. And we're working on redoing our site, but you can go through there. You can see the videos of the kids that we have up there right now. We've done over 1,600 videos, and we only keep active the ones that have still need families. There's information on there too about how you can help in other ways. I would say, like, kind of first step is, like, Mother Teresa has this line. She says, "Find your own Calcutta." Everybody always wanted to go to Calcutta to be with her. She was like, "Find your own Calcutta." Like, and it's usually right where you live. And so discover what the need is in your area. And like one of the easiest things you could do is see if you know of a current foster family and do something kind for them. Say, thank you for what you're doing. Here's an apple pie. Like, just show some love and support them.
Are there resources who would you say, locally, wherever people are listening, well, in the States anyways, because there's people listening all over the world, but in the States anyways, who would somebody contact to get involved, to learn more? You mentioned you and your wife went to classes at the very beginning. About it. Who do you contact for that?
So typically you would look in your own county. And so type in your county name, type in child welfare, foster care, Google all that. And you should be able to come up with quickly with who you need to contact. And what will happen is, typically in most counties, there'll be a no strings attached orientation meeting. So something that lasts maybe like hour and a half. And they just kind of say, here's what the need is. And this is a little bit about foster care. And that's it. It's just it's a quick orientation meeting. What would happen if you want to go beyond that is then typically you would start signing up for a series of classes to be a certified foster parent. And again, it's different from state to state, even county to county in some places. But typically it could be like a 8-week course, 3 hours a week kind of thing, where you learn more about foster care, you learn more about trauma, that kind of thing. If you pursue that more, then they'll do a background check, they'll do a home study, and then some people are like concerned of like what would disqualify me. You don't have to have a perfect past. Sometimes even having a lot of times having some hardship in your life pays off because you can empathize. But if you have harmed a child before and it's on your record, that will disqualify you. But again, most people are like, I did have a misdemeanor here and I did that. And they'll ask you a little bit about it, but typically that's not a big deal.
Okay. Well, thanks for taking the time. Thank you for the incredible work that you're doing. I'm excited to continue to learn more. I know that our audience will be excited to continue to learn more and participate in the Orphan Myth campaign. And then from there, anywhere else we can. So thanks so much, Brian. We appreciate the time.
Thanks, Corey.
And look forward to staying in touch.
Awesome.
Hello, it's Corey here. And I just want to thank you so much for listening into the Hope Strategy podcast. I hope you're enjoying it as much as we are enjoying having these amazing conversations with these incredible individuals talking about hope. We'd love it if you wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, and leaving us a review on iTunes or Spotify or anywhere that you listen to your podcasts, and share it with anybody you feel that can benefit from these messages of hope. Thank you so much for listening to the Hope Strategy podcast.